Hi, this is Nadia. I'm a photographer, writer, and podcaster, and I already had the pleasure to host previous episodes of OpenFrame. Today's guest jumps straight into the conversation with no introduction, so I wanted to take a moment to introduce him to you. Albert Roig is the founder of Carmencita Lab, the biggest film lab in Europe. He has thousands of images go through his hands every single day. So his perspective on the photography industry and on art is really unique and very valuable because he's more removed from the work than a photographer could be. We touch on a lot of subjects around the photography industry and art, but one of the main things we speak about is the unspoken reality behind many photographers' work whose passion projects do not pay the bills. I am so excited for you to listen to this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you hear. Let's go.
Welcome to OpenFrame, a podcast by Pixieset, the place for photographers and other creatives to have inspiring, honest, and uplifting conversations.
Because I've seen a lot of photographers that especially with film, they approach film in a certain way, like it's gonna make my photography better, or I'm gonna be able to charge more money, or I'm gonna do this and do that, and at the end, I think they have a vague idea of what it means actually to be a photographer and to produce work and content that people want to buy or that want to pay you money for. Which this means being a professional photographer. You can be an amazing photographer and not charge a dime for your work. This is also true, and it's amazing if you can do this. I mean, I guess you make a living somehow, or you're rich, which is amazing. Like, congratulations. But if you really say, okay, I want to earn money from my photography, and this is a very different thing from the romantic idea of I'm a photographer, which maybe is closer. I think people who really feel passion about photography approach it in the same way as you would approach painting, perhaps, like you want to paint these landscapes or this beautiful stuff, but also you need to take paintings of a family that wants to have their family portraits and so on, and it's okay, but it's, I think inside the creative, as a photographer, a creative photographer, if you want to make a living, there will be a part of, okay, I need to be precise, I need to be structured, I need to be established. They are paying me for A, B, and C, and they want to sell these burgers, or they want to sell these clothes, or they want to sell this whatever. And then this will coexist somehow with your inner creativity, like I'm paying my shoots to do this, I'm doing this. And it's funny because I've seen this much more clear in commercial photographers, like big commercial photographers, like, I don't know, they shoot for Nike or they shoot for Adidas or something. And then they organize their own shoots once a year or twice a year with work that is completely different. And you would sit and you will say, wow, this is amazing. And yeah, this person created this, they had this idea, they paid the stuff, they paid the lights, they paid, he or she took some friends, whatever, and organize and create these beautiful pictures. But this is not how these pictures are created based on the daily work that they do doing something else. So for me, sometimes, especially for new generations, and I have one of the members of the staff asked me, is like, hey, I don't know, maybe I want to quit. I was like, whoa, is it okay? Because I was offering him like a permanent position. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, but I don't know, because I really want to create art and be a photographer. And I'm like, this is awesome, but how are you gonna make a living? It's like, well, I'm gonna sell some prints and some art. I'm like, okay, but let's have a chat. I told him what I wish somebody would have told me back 10 years ago. Like, what you see, it's not really what is there. like making a living out of.
Did you crush his dreams?
No, but it was a bit like, no, I encourage him, but explaining it how it works, is like, if you want to jump off a cliff because you want to fly, well, you will fly for a while, but then the end will be very bad, So it's true in a way of like probably in a way of like probably the persons he admire or he looks up to, and the work that they are making, it's fueled by something else. It's going to be a day job. It's going to be rich parents. It's going to be, I don't know, maybe they buy cryptocurrencies 10 years ago and now they are rich. I don't know. But that it's not, there is something more behind that people usually don't see. And it's important to realize if you want to do the same.
What exactly do you wish someone had told you 10 years ago? Is that it?
In a simple way, yes. It would be more explaining me, because I love photography. I love still photography nowadays, and but I didn't know what it meant to make a living out of photography. So it's like if I love pastries, but what does it mean to work as a pastry chef? From not even 9 to 5. You will have to work from 5 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, and so you really need to love pastry so much, because as a photographer it was the same. I looked at Cartier-Bresson, Avedon, Gregory Crewdson, all these, even Jonathan Candless, and look at all this and say, wow, this work is amazing, all this work, but really the base for this to grow in a way was a lot of paid work from normal photos or normal photography, or that doesn't make it to the to the front of your portfolio in a way, because it's basically you do what you have to do. Even a lot of photographers that work in wedding and stuff like in wedding in fashion, they make a living out of weddings,
Yeah.
And if you are a 20-year-old and say, yeah, I'm gonna make a living out of this, some will do, but a lot of them they will need to understand, okay, because especially maybe this is actually surprisingly common, what you see in magazines like Vogue or like GQ or what, some are paid, but a lot of them are not paid. It's people that make a living because maybe they have flats or whatever, and they want to take pictures, and they have ideas and say, hey, I have this idea with the shooting with this actress, blah blah, are you interested in publishing it? And they say, okay, but we cannot pay. And they say, okay, I'll do it anyway. We will help you contact the actress or the place or whatever, and we will buy the shoot and publish it, but they are not paying you anything.
I know.
Or just the cost, maybe. So it's really, I wish somebody would have told me this, like how it really works before you are committing to this, because it's sometimes when you discover it, you are too deep already into it. So
here's a vulnerable question. Is that the reason why you're not a full-time photographer today? Because you didn't want to compromise, you didn't want to shoot things just for money? Is that why?
This is a very good question, and I did a lot of I did a lot of jobs that I didn't like, and plus I have to say I did many jobs that I loved. Like I still remember today some of my first jobs, in a very romantic way, of course. Like it was not much money, but it opened the possibilities. But it's been, I don't think there was ever a conscious point about this. It's a bit like boiling the frog. So I opened the lab because I wanted to work with film, and there was no possibilities to work with film in Europe back then in the level we wanted. So we were shipping to the US, and actually it kind of grew in a way that I remember after a year and a half, there was a point I had to decide, okay, do I want to shoot for myself and not be so much involved in the lab, or do I want to be involved in the lab and just like take pictures whenever I want, however I want? And in a way, I felt I could be, my time would be better spent as working for others than trying to work for myself. I honestly, I'm not such a big photographer, like a good photographer myself. Like, I've never thought about it that way. I think there is incredibly talented people, but at that point, especially was 2014. I felt like we could help so much more people, and we could be more relevant as a reliable, good lab than me trying to make it as a photographer, especially because even back then I didn't really know what being a photographer was like, in a way. I had the reference from John and the commercial work and so on, but it was very based in the US, and the US market is the US market. It's not Europe at all. And this is something I wish somebody would have told me before also. Like, what is in the US, it's not what happens in Europe. Like, the culture, the money, it's not the same. So I was kind of figuring it out and trying, and you are young and you think you will change people's minds and blah, blah, blah. Maybe you can a little bit, but at some point I said, okay, let's try to focus on the lab and keep it up and running. I would never imagine for a second that it would be this crazy. Like,
you're the biggest lab in the world, or in Europe.
Maybe in Europe, I guess so. It's kind of crazy. Now, if we think about it, now we have a lab in Barcelona, in Valencia, and Lisboa, and we are close to 20 people. And I have to say, it's been amazing to see. But I could never imagine. Like, I would say, come on, you're joking, right? Like, we were 3 dudes in a small village somewhere, and it was like impossible. So, but what I see now, and it's like, I'm in touch with a lot of photographers, maybe not so many, not as much as I would like to, but I think this is especially for young generations that approach this industry, that I think it's healthy to say, okay, if you want to create this amazing work and shoots, you will have to do this. And then you say, okay, let's go, because this is something I really, really like. So I don't mind shooting 20 weddings. So I can have 3 style shoots of fashion brands that don't pay me with an elephant and something in the desert, you know? If you know, it's amazing. But actually, probably you knew also photographers that they started with fashion and they ditch it for weddings because they needed to pay the bills.
Yes, or they don't ditch it, but they do weddings on the side. However, I mean, you're talking about, you know, shooting anything else other than weddings. That's kind of when you have to supplement with something else. But there are people who only shoot weddings, make a shitload of money with that, and they don't want to do anything else. They really love it.
Totally fine. I mean, yeah, this is true. It's I think this is amazing. Like, for them, it's great. It's super. It's really, really great. But it's true that I think it's one of the things that I missed from the wedding industry. Now that I've, you know, like, the wedding industry just like kind of read down like to second year during these 2 years, is thinking that there is nothing else, you know, and there is a lot more photography than the wedding industry photography, you know. So that's why I grew up within the wedding or social photography, and that's where we met actually.
That's very right, yeah.
So, but now as a lab, you gain a bigger spectrum, and I think I keep thinking that having pictures of your loved ones and your family is probably one of the best things you can do. But at the same time, I see a young generation that are really passionate about photography. and many people that approach photography in a different way, not in a business way, and that is a bit what's the name, that they don't really know what's behind the images they love. You know what I mean? Like
No,
some of my favorite.
I actually don't exactly know. I actually don't exactly know what you mean. Expand.
So I mean in a way of like, oh, I love this photographer, the work they create, and it's so inspiring and blah blah. Yes, but they, like, if you want to do the same, like, you have to know, like, okay, this person doesn't make a living with this. They actually spend money to create this and so on. So it's as you mentioned, maybe it's a bit like crashing the dreams of people, but I think it's a bit healthy in order to, because if you spend like 4 or 5 years working towards something and then you realize, fuck, this is not what I thought it was, and then now I have to start from the beginning, or like to somewhere else doing something else. If you can save you 4 or 5 years of working towards one direction or the other, I think you could actually reach so much further away, you know, like for me, I had the chance to have the lab and to do this, but especially I remember when I was working in Japan, it was very shocking with one of a photographer for a couple months, and all the work I saw from him and that I loved, and it was so inspiring and everything, was not what he was making a living out of. You know, that was all his personal work. So if I would choose myself, like, okay, I want to be like him, I'm gonna take these pictures and I hope somebody pays for them. This. It's it's incredibly difficult. And that's what I think it was. And I was thinking about this topic because I had this conversation with one of the staff a few months ago. So that was.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you said, you know, you have so many photos, thousands of photos pass through your hands every day at the lab, and you see the next generation and what they're doing and what they want to do. And I'm sure you have loads of conversation with photographers as well all the time that you work with, and you said, oh, they want to do this, but they don't know what's behind that. But I think one issue, the problem why they don't know what's behind it, like, it's not their fault. I think it's
no, of course.
I think it's the photographers who are not being honest. Like, where is their money coming from? What is their journey? What is it been like? What are the struggles? If people don't speak the truth, like, the next ones can't know. Like, what you're describing is exactly what I'm going through right now. Like, I left the wedding industry in 2019, just in time.
Hit and run.
I had no idea. I promise, I didn't know what was going to happen, but just in time. I left the wedding industry after 10 years of shooting weddings.
Yeah, that's huge.
And because it was just time for me. I knew it was over. I'm done. And that not for photography wasn't the issue. It was weddings specifically, right? And now last year, I can't even count last year. I almost did no work last year, paid work, because of COVID and all the lockdowns. And I'm only now starting to build my portrait photography business, which I love, but it's not a thriving business yet. I'm doing this podcast. I'm doing this to supplement, like, my life and to pay for my life. And I think a lot of photographers, until you talk to them one-on-one, you have no idea what they're doing. Like, they're not being honest. They might even talk on stage about, you know, these amazing things, but they're not being honest. You know, maybe they have a spouse that, you know.
Yeah. And it's totally fine. But
yeah, but then they're just not saying the truth. And so the next generation is blinded and is like, oh, I can do this. But then they might, you know, come across obstacles and think it's them. They are the problem, when really nobody told them the truth.
Yeah. It can be terribly frustrating to say, oh my God, I'm not getting published. why people is not. But when you start getting closer to it and understanding what's really behind this, it's like, oh, because like, how can I get these gigs, or how can I get, well, the photographer who just shot the cover, like, I mean, there is a lot of people that is self-made, and they were in the right place in the right time with the right people, and they got to, and they do incredible things. This is not, like, this is not I'm not saying that because you are the son of, or you are the friend of, you cannot do amazing things. I'm not saying this, but it is a world that it's not so much about what you can do. It's like what you can work with. It's limited. What's the name? Like, it is a world that it's not about like, okay, I'm the fastest runner, I train 12 hours a day, and I have the best marks. That's it, period. Like, I'm running 100 meters under 10 seconds and I'm the best. No, it's like, it's nothing like
there are no markers really to determine who is the best. It's so subjective.
It's so subjective, and being published somewhere, it can be because many reasons. Like, you can be really, really good, but also, so it's kind of blinding for people, especially people with not so much resources, or coming from a like a social level that is not so high, what they can do. And I think putting a bit of real expectations might help them, like, really achieve what they want, while they can make a living out of it.
Yes.
Or not burn out on the way and they then get lost. And because I can imagine how you can get bitter about, like, yeah, I tried photography for some years, but I really hated it because it didn't even pay at the end, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
There could be so many things, and luckily the wedding industry is one that you get actually paid for the, if you really want to do weddings, you will get paid for weddings.
Yeah.
And it's great, but at the same time, usually it's also a world that involves a lot of connections, being in touch with someone, a lot of marketing, a lot of well, there is a lot of things involved that it's not so much about. And I think people talk about that quite often in conferences also at the same time. It's not so much about also photography itself, but about getting to know each other, giving an idea of like value, being in touch with wedding planners, and so, all this.
But it is, I would say, it is one of the easier things to get into. Not because wedding photography is super hard, and it's so much hard work. But like, to get into, it's easy, as you say, like, you're getting paid, but also weddings happen all the time. There's so many people getting married all the time, except for last year. And when I was a wedding photographer, I had to do almost no advertising or anything. The work just comes because people are getting married left and right. So it in that sense, it's like different to doing other types of photography. What I'm discovering now, and what you just mentioned as well with the connections, and that there are no markers, is that for example, doing portraits is completely different if you want to work with brands and with magazines, because it's really only about connection. People work with people because they know them already, because they've worked with them already, not because they are the best. Like, that has nothing to do with it, because, as you said, like with photos, there isn't a best. There just isn't. There isn't. Yes, there's like technical markers. Like, this is a technical, from a technical point of view, this is a perfect show.
This is very in focus.
Exactly. You have like technical markers, but that doesn't mean to some people, it won't mean anything. They're like, no, I connect with this picture that is not technically perfect, whatever. And then I have so many issues of Vogue or other magazines at home that have images of celebrities that are out of focus, that, we know these images, we know them. Like, it's not about that perfection, or like and being the best. For example, looking at, what's his name, Brooklyn, Victoria Beckham's son.
Yeah, he's shooting, no? Like
he shot for Vogue at 18. Why?
Well,
why did he? Because he's like the best photographer in the world? Because he's no, literally it's about connections, and that's not a bad thing, because I think obviously we want to help our friends and our family, right? If we can, like we all do that. If we can help out a friend, if we can help out family, we all do that, and it's a lovely thing to do. But it's something that I wasn't aware of going in, and I think so many people are not aware of that. It's not just about being the best and you can work your butt off. It's also, there's an element, and we don't want to talk about this because we're all about hustle, 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 hard work. There is an element of luck. There's an element of luck, as you said before, of being in the right place at the right time sometimes, of like having the right person see your work in the moment where they need it. And that, like, there is an element of that you have to have as well.
Actually, and I think there is photography is incredibly broad in many senses. Like, I was thinking about this with an example that is very simple, but we take pictures, like we take portraits of everyone at the lab once a year with a large format camera, and it's through a friend of ours that had a large format camera and he wanted to take pictures, and he was starting. He was quite a hard year for him. Last year we had a lot of conversations. He helps us all the time. I was like, hey, why don't you come here and shoot? As it would be amazing, you know? And we did a small shoot last year, and this year, hey, come back and you take a picture of everyone. And then I'll fly you to Lisbon and you take a picture for them. And then in Barcelona, you know, like, and it's not that I Googled like, hey, which is the best large format portrait photographer. Yeah. It was like, hey, you can do this. You are my friend. You do it nicely, you know, and I, you know, it's like, let's roll. If there is incredible pictures, you know, but amazing, but if it's more about another thing, you know, and
absolutely,
and I think it's I'm not, we are not hiding it or anything, and it's very, I think it's fairly common. And then in the other side, it's true that there is, what I would say is like, there is what's the name, it's clear, it's important to know the difference between how this person or like was able to get there, because then it can help you understand what they did. For example, like I saw a project the other day. It's called it's a super famous project. I was not aware about it. It's about photographing the projects in the US, in LA. It's everything in black and white, large format. It's from a Dutch photographer. It's called it will come to my mind. And it's an amazing work. She was a photojournalist, and she discovered this place 20 years ago, and she's been working in this area towards this project, portraying like people who live on the edge in a very, you know, and there is audiovisual work. It's super interesting. I'll try to find it later and send it to you.
Yes, you can put it in the show notes. That book.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Sometimes I forgot the most ridiculous names, you know. Okay. And this, if you admire her work, and I would study her trajectory and say, okay, she did this, and she said, like, I was taking some portrait somewhere, somebody told me about this, and I fell in love and I engaged with this. So I think it's important to understand what has what's the name, what has enabled this person to do this work. You know, it's like, okay, she was at this place at the right point, or like moving, and she created this body of work that is amazing, and we all engage with it. Because, as you said, I think photography touches, especially now, if you work as a photographer, touches more, it's more about emotions, and it's not so much about representing like I don't know, before it could be like you would be an architecture photography. Then yes, you have to portray these straight lines and everything, and be technical. But the photography that most of people love is the one that brings feelings to you in a way. And there is no right or wrong. Even like, again, with photographers from Japan, they have a different idea. From the United States, they have another one. European and probably African photographers, they have another way of seeing things that we can connect. But I think it's not so much about the technical things, like you cannot measure it's good or not good. And it's more about like their like what they say or how can they express themselves with their photos. And probably I would say this is the most important thing. Like if you want to create work that is relevant and you have no friends in the top spheres of the magazines, just create the work that you love, and probably and if it connects, amazing, and if it doesn't connect, it's okay. Which this comes in conflict with, I think, one of the hot topics, maybe even like sociology. Like it's very fucked up to base your self-esteem on the approval of everyone. But it's how the world rolls pretty much these days, and I think it's very sad, because it's I mean, we all had, I guess I had this experience many times when I took an image and I loved it because it worked, the lights and the shadows, and there was a bicycle, and for me it was really nice picture. I was really proud of that picture. And I uploaded it and it's like, yeah, whatever, like nobody likes it. It's like 12 likes, or like, then I put a simple portrait of like one of my friends in a studio, very simple. She's very pretty, and it's like skyrocketing everything. Oh, this is amazing! Wow, this is so good. I'm like, no, this is not amazing. It was just like,
it's not an amazing photo. It's just a beautiful person.
Exactly, which I had nothing to do with. I didn't give birth to her. I didn't take care of her. Like I just took a picture.
Listen, I've had this conversation many times behind closed doors with people when you upload different images and people say, "Oh my gosh, what a beautiful image." What they really mean is, "What a beautiful person." And that's a good one. That's another really tricky one. What are we showing?
Yeah.
What are we showing? Because as photographers, we hold power as to what the mainstream pop culture media, what people see as normal, what people see as beautiful, what people see as acceptable. We can shape that, like how people see things. And because we have that power, I believe we have a responsibility to show everything, and not just the pretty pictures, or like what society deems as
I think in a way it's normal that we want to create pretty work, because it's normal. I mean, unless if you look through art history and you look at Pollock, like the most famous works with the paint, and you can say, okay, why is this guy doing this? Well, it was after Second World War. The world was fucked up, and this was expression of him. Of course, this makes sense, and it's beautiful to understand that also. But what there is this sentence to it's like, should we give people what they need or what they want? And it's, the other day I was talking with a guy. He runs a lab, but only for prints. They only do prints, like what's the name? Like optical prints, straight from the negative in Paris. And he was showing me the work of some really nice photographer. He does campaigns for Versace and stuff like this, but his personal work is amazing. It's like, he was showing me some pictures with just rubber bands, like with some lining, and it was so simple and so beautiful. I was like, this is amazing. Like, it's really simple. So I think, but it was on pair. He had the Versace campaigns, and he had this on his feed and in his portfolio. And I think it's really cool. I could really understand, okay, you're getting paid for this, and probably you do this very well. But at the same time, you have a site that enables you to paint, to show whatever you want, not just be a. Can I swear? Like, can I say, like?
We already did. Too late.
Okay.
We already
But
did.
you're not just like a beach of what people want to see, or not what that has more likes. or that works better or not. But you also like, I think it's super brave to just show like, hey, I think this is beautiful, and even if I don't understand it or you don't understand it, I think this is relevant. It's a bit like the apples from Cézanne, back in the day. People is like, why the fuck are you painting some apples? It's taking you 2 weeks and you paint the painting with apples, but it's making a point. Like, this is worth it,
Yeah, but it's weird though, because, sorry for interrupting, but like how sometimes, if you look at history, sometimes someone creates something and it's not accepted, it's not valued until 300 years later. And then someone will say, oh, this is art. Like, do you get what I mean? Like, I find it quite tricky. Like, what is art? Is art only, because of our conversation right now as well, is art only when you're not being paid?
I don't think so. I think it's what I think what you make with your point. I think it's totally true. And what I would love is, or I would hope that people create things that are not in line with the pop culture or the mass culture. Because if whoever didn't create this 300 years ago, that nobody liked, we could not see it now. If people would only create towards like what gives me more like, what gives me more attention to, it's and usually I think often extraordinary people actually just are the ones that take the leap, and say, okay, I'm gonna do something different, and everybody's like, oh my god, they did this. And when it starts catching attention, everybody's moving that way. So I think it would be really cool to encourage people to create their own thing, rather than just follow the thing. And it's a good question of, is art can be biased, but there is Banksy had a very cool painting about this. I don't know. It was something with money and art, but I will try to Google it again.
Is it the one where he destroyed the painting?
No, it was a graffiti, and it's like when money speaks, art shuts down or something like this. But that's something questioning this relationship.
Yeah, but that's not true if you look at history.
Exactly. That's it, and that's exactly the same.
Yeah, the Mona Lisa was commissioned.
Yeah.
And we call it art now. Yeah. And maybe back then they would be like, oh, you're not an artist because you've been paid for this. But now we call it art. So it's a bit, and who knows, like with the photos that are being created now, where people are like, yeah, this is okay. In 200 years, it might be of immense value, like.
Yeah, it's like, I was thinking about the Avedon shots, the commission with the elephants and all these things, and and I think it's wow, but this can be a very long conversation.
Yes, but it can.
That there is, I think, art usually, and that's why I want to make another note there. Usually it has to be intentional. It's very weird that somebody makes something without wanting or knowing and say, okay, this is art. I mean, there has to be, I think, a thought about, okay, I'm creating something relevant, that I want it to be art. Maybe it sucks, because maybe it sucks. Most of the time it sucks. But there was this intention at some point, like, okay, I'm gonna create this piece. And I think it takes the will of saying, okay, I'm gonna dive into this, and let's see what happens. But it's courage to say, okay, I'm gonna do something that I haven't seen anywhere else. I'm gonna try it out. Let's see if if it's cool. Let's see if when I do it, it actually resonates, and then I'm gonna let it out in the world. Let's see if people digs it or not, or in after a few whatever they understand it. But then there is a so I think art is linked to the will of making art, of saying, like, if I
I like that. Art is intentional. Art is courage. I like that. I like
it.
that.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the truth is that it's, in a way, it's a big privilege, in a way, because you need to have a like some kind of a stability or like or safety net, or either you are super crazy and like a bit romantic, or in the bohemian, like Van Goghs or whatever, like, but they all had like some kind of financial support, even if it was very, very tiny, but and they say, okay, I'm going to commit to this. Or great artists that were starving. I mean, this is a classic. And then I recently discovered there was another current of art, which is based on it's a Japanese way of thinking on mundane objects. Like it was art in the everyday objects or something like this.
I think I have a book about that. Yeah.
It's basically appreciating like wow, this cup, for me it's beautiful. Like, this is from the Duralex, the French company, and this is not intended to be art. This was intended to be a cup of coffee, and there is probably like 10 millions of these, but I think it's amazing. And this is another type of art which is not created by persons. It's another thing. But I think it's a very good point what you meant.
So art is also about the person looking at it. Then if the person consuming it thinks it's art, then it's art. It's the value someone else puts on it as well.
I think there should be a room for that also. Like that's the beauty of art. Like there should be a room for, like, in a way, to understand that art, that it can be, for you it's art and for me it's not. And that's the beauty of it. Like, there is one of my first girlfriend, she was a designer, and she had a poster at home in German, and was saying, is this art, or I can throw it in the rubbish?
Oh yeah, I know that saying. Ist das Kunst oder kann das weg?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a German poster. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So, but I think, and that's amazing. That I think it's and it's human nature, because I mean it's culture. It's either you are nature or you are culture. That's what separates us from animals in a way. That we are able to consider this, like, I can pay €1 million for this and be the happiest man on earth, very broke but happiest, and you can say this is rubbish, and I just throw 20 of these yesterday in the trash from my grandma's home, And I think it's amazing that we are able to create this, and we are able to conceive, as you said, like, there is many truths, and they all coexist at the same time. I can think this, and yeah. Actually, what is interesting, that even if you go a step further, is the fact of saying that we do this all the time. Humans, we do this all the time, and in TV, on internet. Like, okay, Nadia just paid, I don't know how much money for this painting, and she just posted it, and I'm like, I don't really like it, but I can, if I want to understand, like, why did she like it so much, and why did she pay for it? I'm gonna start questioning myself or yourself about, what does she see in this that is important? Like, is there something else that I'm not seeing? And I think when you have this approach, you can really get a lot more out of the creative environments. I did this with wedding images. You can do this all at the same time. If everybody likes this, you can say, okay, why everybody likes this picture? Oh, it's because it's a pretty girl. Okay, then I understand. Or why everybody likes about this flower bouquet, I don't get it. And then you can question, okay, there is this, and this is what it takes, and this is what it means, and this flower, and okay, now I get it. And it's kind of broadening, but this is a very complicated word. Yeah, like your spectrum of what's interesting or not. And yeah, I think, I don't know, do you feel this happens with wedding industry? Like, people is always like, there is kind of a self-reflection, or it's more looking into the, because there is a lot of money involved with the wedding industry.
It's not just the money, it's also a wedding you have to take certain shots at a wedding. You just have to, right? So there's like almost like a template or a rule book a little bit. Yes, you have some creative freedom. And there are wedding photographers who maybe have a bit of more of a special, distinctive style, who are like, no, but my clients, they're different. I can do whatever I want. They don't care at all about the safe shots. I can do whatever I want. Da, da, da. I think there's like 0 point whatever percent. Like I think that's very, very few though. But even those photographers, I think even them, I don't think that everything they do is 100% whatever they want, and they still have to stick to some kind of template. So as much as people want to be like creative and stuff in the wedding industry, and you know this because you see tons of wedding photos as well, it is a lot of the same. And I think
But
most people don't reflect about that, or like, and it's hard to break out of it. Actually, like very, very few photographers can do it. There was a guy, Ian Weldon, at the Nine Dots conference where I was speaking this week, and he says he's not a wedding photographer, but he is a wedding photographer, and he calls himself not the wedding photographer or something. And his wedding photos are similar to Martin Parr photos.
oh, really?
Very, just, you could almost say ugly if you wanted to use that word, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not glamorous, pretty wedding photos, right?
Yeah, like super raw.
In fact, he did that for years and years, and everyone was like criticizing him. Everyone was saying, not everyone, but people were saying, you're doing a disservice to the wedding industry, da da da. And in fact, Martin Parr contacted him. They've been working together. Like, this is what happens when you stick to what you really believe and who you really are, even if it takes decades. Like,
yeah,
the right audience will find you. Like, they will love it. And what I was just bringing it back, I think, yes, there are a few wedding photographers in this industry specifically who break out of it. But generally, I don't see a lot of reflection within this industry. And if there is, like, if you speak to people one-on-one in private, yes, they think about it, but they can't put it into action. They can't actually change anything, because the pretty flowers and the beautiful dress and the thin bride is what gets the most likes. So it's hard for wedding photographers to have that courage, as you said, to have the courage to be like, no, but I am going to implement a change. I think it's really hard for wedding photographers to do that, to actually.
I agree 100%. And even like, I think there is some privilege also in this way. I mean, if you have to feed 3 kids with your photography, and
yes,
you will not be risking to question yourself, or you are crazy, which is possible, but like to risk and say, I'm gonna do something nobody is asking me, and and if you are not playing it safe, I think it's harder to be courage. And I think that's why there is people that if they are very established, it's cool that they can challenge this. But believe me, in the fashion industry, it's the same. Like, people copy each other all the time. It's crazy. It's like, I was talking with people that works more inside the fashion store, and it's crazy. They all copy each other. And probably in the portrait photography, it's the same. Like, the portrait industry in the US, it's huge. Like, there is these workshops from this guy in New York who actually teaches how to take portraits of actors and stuff in his studio. And so I think it's okay that there is this like this set of how to make things, like, this is the standard. What I think I would take from what you just mentioned in this way, because I have another example of somebody that he actually tried to be like a final wedding photographer with film and everything, a guy in Spain, and then I think it was not his thing at some point, and he started switching to a more like super dark kind of look, and completely different, very blurred, very moments. And now a lot of people is actually copying him in a way because of he was able to step up. But I think some people get angry about this, like what you say, you're doing a disgrace to wedding photography or whatever, because they think that wedding photography is one thing, and it's not one thing. If somebody else wants to do something else, now it's this person is fighting to actually like create a bump in the circle of wedding photography, and it's another idea of thinking about wedding photography, and probably now that there is a bump and he speaks at a conference, more people will say, oh, this I feel very comfortable in this, in understanding wedding photography this way. So I'm gonna and they will both coexist. The super classic wedding photographer, the Martin Parr wedding photographer, the dark wedding photography, the whatever, the point and shoot wedding photography, or even in smartphone. It's actually people doing smartphone photography in weddings and stuff like this.
I know that it just takes courage to
yes,
like on the side of the minority, and not on the side of the majority. And I think that courage is what makes kind of the difference a little bit. But what would you like to see in the photography industry? You see so many images, so many, like more than even I as a photographer, I don't look at that many photos. I think like as
it's impossible
because you develop them in the lab. So what would you like to see? What would you wish for the photography industry to change? What would you like more of or less of? Like,
actually, it's very funny because I've been thinking a lot about this for a couple of years, and what I wish. Oh, sorry, it's a bit noisy from like they are using a compressor. Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it.
Okay. Sorry. Sometimes I need to clean with air. What I would love to see in the photography industry, in a way, it's more thought into it. It's less images and more thought behind the images. What does pictures mean? What do people feel, or why do we do some things? Like what is important or not? Like a bit of like I would love that somebody would write a modern version of like on photography from Susan Sontag or from Benjamin Walter. There is a new one, like because it's a new chapter with the smartphones. Like, and I see some photographers, especially in Asia, that put some thought into it. I was talking with some guys in Mexico that they were telling me about a South Korean philosopher that thinks about like what does the smartphone means and these images and all this. And I would love to see a bit more of this behind the people who create photography, not the one that is starting and they are just starting to learn how to use it, but I think people who has been here for a while and is probably on the top, or like is on a established level, that to spend some time thinking about, okay, what does photography mean? Why does it matter? And what should we do towards that? I think that's something that is missing a bit. That usually people just creating, blah, 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 shooting, and there is few people that puts a lot of thought into it, but still I don't think it's too much. And sometimes when this thought is channeled through images, it gets very blurred by the noise that, like if I'm making images that question like photography or like what we do or what we see, and I put it in the same platform where everybody is just like constantly puking images into it, it's gonna be very hard to distinguish. But if somebody is putting thought, text, reflection, something that you can think about in there, it will. And one of my favorite photographers that do this, he has a small blog and talks about what photography is, what photography means, what is, and I think it's fascinating. It's like a fresh air to say, okay, my God, yes. And especially because words and thoughts, I mean, literature, or it's not two-dimensional. It's infinite. Like the depth you can actually reach with writing and thinking. It goes beyond what you will be able to, create.
Okay.
But this is my wish list for
your wish list.
Yes.
How do you think we can achieve that? How do you think this industry, photographers, can achieve to be more intentional and thoughtful about what they put out?
I think, of course, we need to make our bread and butter every day, and we need to just keep going. But I think it's just planting this seed of questioning and trying to just take a step back every now and then. Just because you get into this like hamster wheel, and you're like speeding, and then you get more reach, and then you get collaboration, and then you are like speeding up, and at some point it's like, but you're not going anywhere. You are in the wheel again. So I think it's trying to take a step back every now and then and questioning or looking for inspiration in getting out of your comfort zone, or what you do, or like even visiting modern art exhibitions or whatever. Which at the same time, I think every time you see new artwork, it's interesting to approach it with some critical thinking. So it's not because it's artwork and it's in the museum, it has to be the best like it can do something for you, or it can do nothing. But I would say just try to get exposed to that, like not get in the wedding industry, getting out of the wedding industry.
Your own industry. And I think yourself to life, just to life, because if we expose ourselves to art or to other photographers and stuff, we see a lot of like the same again. If I believe if we want to create with courage, and if we want to create something that has intention and purpose and means something to us and hopefully to other people, it comes out of real life often. Like we only work, like especially the wedding photographers. I remember, like, it's just so intense, so crazy busy. And I'm sure in other fields of photography as well, whatever people do, you are in the wheel, as you say, and you're not really living. You don't have time. You don't have time for people. You don't have time for love. You don't have time for joy. You don't have time to play. How are you going to create something new if you don't make space for life, to actually experience life, experience joy, experience sadness, experience a lot of different emotions? That's how we create, right?
Absolutely. It's usually out of this. There needs to be. That's why I was telling when you talked about that. What is that? I think there has to be some kind of self-reflection about that. If you think about, like, one of my favorite painters is Rothko, and if you think about what, like, Rothko was not saying, okay, let's see who's gonna pay me for this. It's like he was diving into this and saying, okay, this is my, I reached to this conclusion, and maybe nobody likes it, and he doesn't care, and I think this is it's interesting, and there is this limbo of, in a ways, like because sometimes it happens, like, especially I see both sides in the industry. Like, I can deal with Kodak and Fujifilm and big brands, and it's an industry. It's basically an industry, and it's production, it's profit, it's margins, it's revenue, it's whatever. And then there is the other part, which is like the completely creating, that doesn't care about any of this. And I think this is like being in being in the sea or being in inland. Sometimes you are so much inland as an industry that you don't even see the shore. You don't even see the sea. It's like you are in and you create. And some artists are so far away, deep in the sea, that they don't even see the land. And it loses kind of this connection. I think the most interesting thing happens, or it's able to when things are kind of close into the shoreline. Maybe it's because I live close to the sea in the Mediterranean and I like to think like this. But when you have artists that are aware of the world they live in and how it works, and they can actually push some buttons like Banksy we were talking before, or like you would see Adedan, for example, in this case, or even Cartier-Bresson, which is one of my favorite photographers ever. His friends, he was a surrealist himself. He was a surreal, and his friend, I think was Robert Capa, was like, yeah, but when you talk to the commissioners and the magazines, just say you are a journalist. Then you do whatever you want. But you just say you are a journalist, and then that you are a photojournalist, and you will do this photo reportage for them. But then do whatever you want, you know. But don't tell them you are a surreal photographer. So these people who is actually on the edge between one or the other, I think it's when it starts happening very interesting stuff. Because I've met artists that are so far away, so deep into their thing, and they are so like that it's impossible. Like you see that they do beautiful things or very interesting thinking, but it never reach the shoreline to the common people, and so it never, you are not able to what's the name, to embrace it or to touch it, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a bit abstract what I said.
No,
sometimes it happens.
I love that picture. It makes perfect sense. That's the shoreline and the sea is a good picture to use. That's makes sense. Thank you so much, Albert. I already have, from what you just said, I have so many more questions. My brain is like buzzing right now.
Okay, thank you. I love, and when you reached out, I love that you wanted to talk about these things and things that are not about like, oh, why film and why not film? I mean, we could make 3 podcasts about it also. But it's super interesting that the approach that you are having. So thank you so much for having me. It's been
you're so welcome. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time and just your insight in this industry, which is so interesting because you're not like a working photographer in that sense, but you work with photos every single day. And that is so fascinating for me to hear your side, your perspective on our industry, on this industry. It's beautiful. And it has my brain like working right now in overdrive.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for triggering my thoughts. Really, yeah.
And I hope many people did enjoy it also.